Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the Bible to look at a deeply powerful daily bread devotional titled A Cup of Cold Water. We're going to unpack this incredible, almost paradoxical tension in the text. On one hand, you have the very real, heavy cost of faith, and on the other, the absolute eternal value of our smallest, most unglamorous actions. It's a fascinating study in contrasts. If you've ever felt like your tiny acts of service just don't matter, or if you felt that uncomfortable social friction because of your convictions, this explainer is absolutely going to reframe how you look at your daily life. So let's start right at the core of the text with the main verse. Here is Matthew 10:42. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. Jesus is highlighting something wild here. Even the most ordinary, seemingly insignificant act of service, literally just a cup of cold water, holds massive eternal weight. He guarantees that person will certainly not lose their reward. It's such a striking, ironclad promise. To outline the big picture first before we dive into the details, we're going to tackle this in 6 parts. 1, a cup of cold water. 2, the cost of following. 3, grand gestures versus small acts. 4, steps to live it out. 5, the unglamorous kingdom work. And finally, number 6, how nothing is ever wasted.
Let's jump into section 1, a cup of cold water.
Okay, so picture this. Jesus is wrapping up a really heavy, challenging passage, and he suddenly pivots to focus on just how incredibly generous God is toward our smallest acts. Verse 42 is quietly powerful. A cup of cold water is defined here as one of the absolute simplest, most ordinary acts of service you could possibly imagine, yet Jesus attaches a guarantee to it. The significance here is just staggering, right? It proves that absolutely nothing done in his name is ever wasted. It totally flips the script, moving our focus from needing to do massive, impressive things to just being deeply faithful in the ordinary, everyday moments. Moving on to section 2, the cost of following. Wow, before we get to the amazing rewards, we have to confront a pretty heavy reality. The text opens with some statements that can honestly feel a bit shocking. Jesus is completely upfront that he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. He came to bring division. And it's not because he's harsh. It's because ultimate loyalty to him naturally creates friction with people whose loyalty lies somewhere else. The text even notes that loving a parent or child more than Jesus makes one unworthy of him. Taking up your cross literally means that sometimes you're going to lose the approval of the people closest to you. But then, he completely flips the paradigm. Whoever loses their life for his sake will actually find it. The cross isn't the end, it's the actual path to new life. Let's really look at these two competing forces, family and social approval on one side versus full devotion to Jesus on the other. This has huge implications, especially if you're a college student right now. For a lot of students, the biggest barrier to fully following Jesus isn't some super complex theological debate. It's relational. It's the very real fear of losing a parent's approval, losing the comfort of your friend group, or giving up the security of fitting perfectly into your family's expectations. When you choose full devotion, you are actively giving up that social comfort. But the profound promise here is that when you give up everything for Jesus, you aren't really losing. You're gaining the only thing that actually lasts.
That brings us to section 3, grand gestures versus small acts.
Jesus structures his promises here with this beautifully escalating progression. It's amazing. Look at this. Whoever welcomes the disciples, well, they're actually welcoming Jesus. And whoever welcomes Jesus welcomes the Father. Welcoming a prophet gets you a prophet's reward, and welcoming a righteous person results in a righteous person's reward. And then, almost to make absolutely sure no one feels left out, he adds that giving a simple cup of water to one of his little ones means you will never lose your reward. Literally, every single act of care counts eternally. I want to compare 2 very different theories of what ministry looks like: grand gestures versus small acts. This is the gospel applied straight to community life. On one side, you've got those highly visible grand gestures, preaching on a stage or leading a massive Bible study. On the other side, you have small acts, texting a struggling friend, making sure the new student in class feels welcome, or just spending an hour quietly listening to someone whose life is falling apart. The takeaway? You do not have to be the one on stage doing highly visible work to be doing vital kingdom work. Jesus intimately sees those tiny acts. He counts them, and they carry eternal weight.
Let's look at section 4, steps to live it out.
All right, so how do we actually do this? The text outlines a very clear step-by-step process for us. Step 1, Honestly name the relationship or approval that is currently competing with your full devotion. Get real about it. Step 2, bring that exact tension to God in prayer and ask Him to reorder your priorities. Step 3, meditate on verse 39, specifically looking at what Jesus is asking you to let go of right now. And step 4, take one concrete step this week toward following Jesus, even if it costs you something socially. It's a highly practical roadmap for navigating that relational tension we talked about.
Which brings us to section 5, the unglamorous kingdom work.
Once we handle that relational tension, we are totally freed up to engage in beautiful hidden ministry. We really need to actively look for opportunities to serve quietly. The text challenges us to give one literal or figurative cup of cold water this week, just something small, concrete, and done in His name. Look for the person in your life who is struggling but staying completely silent, and reach out to them. Let the promise of verse 42 be the motivation for your faithfulness in these completely unglamorous, totally unseen parts of life. And finally, make it a habit to trace back every small act of care you receive to God's generosity and just say thank you.
I love this caption near the bottom of the page because it highlights such a profound truth. In the final sprint of the semester, when grand gestures feel impossible, remember that a cup of cold water is enough. If you're a college student, this is a massive relief. When you are totally exhausted, buried under exams, and stretched way too thin, the pressure to perform massive, impressive feats of ministry is lifted off your shoulders. You don't need grand gestures right now. A simple, quiet cup of cold water offered to someone else is entirely enough for Him.
And finally, section 6, nothing is ever wasted.
We arrive at the clear conclusion of this research, summarized perfectly in this resounding promise. Nothing done for Jesus is wasted. When you give up everything for Him, despite those intense relational costs we looked at earlier, you gain the absolute only thing that lasts. Not a single quiet text message, not 1 hour of listening, not one unglamorous act of service is ever overlooked or wasted by Him. It literally all matters.
So I want to leave you with this challenging question from the text to really ponder today. What relationship or approval most competes with your full devotion to Jesus right now? Think about what it would actually look like to lose your life socially in that specific area for His sake, trusting completely that you'll find it again in Him. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this reframes the ordinary, totally unglamorous moments of your week.